So we obviously have some more work to do. And there are some guides out there. There are some mavericks, some people out there who are changing things. There are departments that are doing things quite differently. I'll talk about that a little bit later on. And I have to say, I have to give a little shout out to Étienne Laliberté. He's going to be speaking a little bit later. Étienne may be even in the room hidden somewhere in disguise. Is Étienne here? No. He's giving a talk a little bit later on. I think it's worth catching because his blog with his 50 ideas about how we could improve staffing was fantastic. And he's building on that, trying to get managers to understand the flexibility that's available to them, the different ways that we can do things.
So I just want to welcome you to the FedTalks at this year's NCR Innovation Fair. Bienvenue au FedTalk du Salon de l'Innovation de la Région de la Capitale Nationale. This is actually our last FedTalk for today. I'm Shelley St. George, and I'll be the moderator for this session. So as many of you probably know, these were modeled after TED Talks, which are a showcase for speakers presenting well-formed ideas. FedTalks, like the one we are about to hear, are a popular and recurring part of the fair. Le format est constitué d'une présentation de 20 minutes, suivie de 10 minutes de questions.
The format is a 20-minute presentation followed by a question period and comments.
Introduce our speaker. Étienne Laliberté is a Canadian free agent with Transport Canada, with a range of skills and experience in people management, change management, and leadership and organizational development. Étienne will speak about changing organizational culture through mindsets and behaviors in his talk entitled, Enough Talk, Time to Launch the Second Act. So with that, I will give you Étienne.
Good afternoon. By show of hands, who here has never heard of the Public Service Employee Survey? Who has never, has anyone filled it in the past? Yeah. Is anyone involved in implementing and doing the follow-up of the Public Service Employee Survey, either analyzing results, implementing some of the solution? Yeah, we have a few, great. Who's supervisor? Managers of a business unit? Any executives? Kings or queens? No? Great, okay. So again, by show of hand, who would agree that the Public Service Employee Survey is about the employees? There's a bit of skepticism in the room. I'm glad to hear that. It's something that I used to believe, but I have since changed my mind. And like any bad habit that we're trying to get rid of, the best way to get rid of an old belief is to replace it by a new, better idea. And that's what I will try to do in the next 20 minutes. And I want to share a story to get there. The story begins in 2005. I had just joined the law enforcement branch of Fisheries and Oceans Canada in the Pacific region. It's called Conservation and Protection. Has anyone heard of it? So over there, they're affectionately called the Fish Police, but they are 95% of the 200 employees over there are law enforcement officer, work on boats, wear body armor, carry guns. So it's real law enforcement work. A little different than what we do here, most of us in our offices. When I got there in 2005, the organization was afflicted with a long-standing problem. Going back to 1999, after a failed staffing process, all the appointments had been challenged, grievances went up to the federal court, it evolved into conflicts in the workplace, eroded trust, everyone was an acting supervisor, so they would be supervising their buddies for 3 months, and then their buddies would be supervising them. It became very difficult for any supervisor to do their job properly. And when I got there, it was the highest profile staffing action undertaken under the new Public Service Employment Act, which had just came into force literally 2 weeks before I got there. And now when I arrived, 2/3 of all the supervisory positions were vacant and had been for the last 6-7 years. So, and according to the 2005 Public Service Employee Survey, which also had been administered just a month prior to my arrival, the data was indicating that in terms of employee engagement, this organization was probably the worst in the entire public service, bar none. The crisis, however, presented an opportunity. I saw, for example, the problems with regard to staffing as a means through which we could rebuild trust between staff and management. I also realized that a transitional approach to staffing would not be sufficient. We would require to take a more transformational approach, and also that staffing alone would not be sufficient. We probably need to match it with other strategies in the people management realm. But definitely, I was of the opinion that programs and policies alone would not suffice to change the culture in this organization. So quickly, here's what we did. First and foremost, we had to stop the bleeding, and that was staffing, clearing the staffing vacancy backlog. It was the single biggest pain point for the people over there, and we very quickly distanced ourselves from collective staffing and pools, and instead adopted a one vacancy, one job poster approach to staffing. We ended the use of resumes, cover letter, written tests, and interviews, instead default back to paperboard and reference check, only that. A 3-member panel would review the applications. The hiring manager was never on the review panel. And because the method was very steady, very consistent over a period of 10 years, over time, the applicants were able to turn their written narrative that they were submitting into some kind of a portfolio that they could improve and upgrade. It also, because the goalposts were not changing, because we were always using the same statement of merit criteria, always using the same assessment method, people had confidence that if they start investing time in developing the skills that they lack or getting the experience that was missing, they had a fair shot at getting a job. And consistency was the key. All of that combined resulted in being able to run staffing processes in 3 weeks. That's 3 weeks between the moment poster came out on public service at the time, now PSRS, and the moment we would announce who's been selected for appointment. And we did that consistently 100 times over in the next 5 years. This was a big piece of it, but on top of that, we also put a tremendous amount of emphasis on internal communication, especially coming out from the senior management, the director. Just nothing earth-shattering, just following a few basic principles: proactive, timely, sustain, leaving no place for rumors. Also, very early, we pushed the reset button on the relationship with the union. At the time when the director started in this role, he was getting 9 to 10 grievances on his desk per week. So we made an agreement with the union that at the very least we would get the courtesy of a phone call before agreements would be filed, and if we could do anything to resolve the problem before it escalated, we would. Beyond the union, we also involve employees in decision-making, decisions that actually matter to them. One little known fact about fishery officer is that they have as a condition of employment that they can be deployed anywhere in the country. So it's an issue that matters a lot to them, because that determines they have no control over where they're going to be posted, where they're going to live. So together, we collectively developed a standing operating procedure according to their criteria, and it was just signed off by management. After 4 years of staffing freeze, we also ran our first recruitment campaign, and once again, speed was of essence there. What used to take a year to administer, we did in 3 months. We were relentless in our quest to improve performance management, and we did some pretty neat things when it came to learning and development, awards and recognition, which I will have to skip over because each of those topics could be a 1-hour talk in itself. But really, those little things are just a pretext for what I really want to brag about, which is the result, where that led. So fast forward to 2008, 3 years after starting this transformation, the Public Service Employee Survey came out, and once again, we did the analysis, look at the result, and compare the positive responses to the 100 indicators in the survey. And here are some of the highlights that emerged 3 years after embarking on a transformation. And remember, we were the worst organization in the public service when we started. So for example, to the question, the relationship between my union and senior management is highly productive, we were up 20%, while the rest of the public service was down 10%. To the question, overall, I am treated with respect, we were up 25%, while the rest of the public service was down. To the question relating to staffing, when I was a candidate in a competition during the past 3 years, I had an opportunity to demonstrate my capability for the position. We were up 28%, despite doing staffing in a complete different way than anyone else. This also corresponded with the first 3 years of the new Public Service Employment Act. And elsewhere in the public service, to that question, the results were down by 11%. Or to the question, competitions are run in a fair manner, we were also up by 28%. Other questions. I'm encouraged to be innovative and taking initiative in my work. I told you about the employee involvement in decision-making. Well, that resulted in a 28% increase. I have a say in decision and actions that have an impact on my work, up 29%. My organization does a good job of supporting employee career development, up 35%. I believe that senior management will try to resolve the concern raised in this survey, up 36%. Now we were 17 points above the rest of the public service on that. To the question, essential information flows effectively from senior management to staff, up 39%. And the cherry on the sundae, overall, I'm satisfied with my career in the public service. We were up 49%. It was an improvement of 350% relative to where we started in 3 years only. Overall, we had improved on 84% of the public service employee service survey indicators, which is almost all of them, and the average improvement was 17%, compared to the rest of the public service that had only improved on about 18% of the indicators by a meager 3%. When a newspaper article once again was published to discuss which organization in the public service are the best employers to work for due to their employee engagement, we had moved from the worst in the public service to the second best in 3 years. Which is strange when you consider that we're still talking about the same employees doing the same work with the same people, mostly in the same places. So what changed? This is what I want to posit, that the Public Service Employee Survey is in fact not about the employees. It's about leadership. And by that I mean organizational leadership and good people management. But this talk isn't supposed to be about leadership and good management. It's supposed to be about mindsets and behaviors with a bit of data and measurement thrown into the mix. So in fact, why should we care about data and measurement? I have 3 reasons for that. First, what we discovered in our experience was that data removes the gut feeling decisions, the self-interest motivated decisions, and the opinions that are based on nothing but opinions. One interesting detail that I skipped earlier on was that halfway between the 2005 survey and the 2008 survey, my director and I came back from a staff meeting that had gone extremely well. The vibe was really positive, and actually we were a bit surprised by how optimistic the staff were given our past history. And the director said, I feel like we're turning the corner, but I don't want to get too excited about it, just in case it's a false impression. And I suggested, well, let's look into it. Let's re-administer the public service internally. So we went to the Arwet team. They recreated the public service employee survey, exactly, question for question, same rating scales. And the results quickly came back. And now we had evidence to base the next phase of our action plan. The evidence we uncovered actually confirmed that it was not just a gut feeling. We had plenty of data. First of all, the data identified some pain points, some things that we still had to work on, that we still had to focus on. But at the very least, we could isolate the problem and determine whether we need an axe to solve the problem or a surgical knife, depending on the circumstances. Also, it showed us exactly the areas where we could double down on what was already working well. In this case, it was staffing, communication, union management relations, and employee involvement in decision-making. And beyond that, it gave us some confidence that the timing was right to build, that we had a foundation strong enough to expand our transformation strategy beyond those 4 areas and start looking into performance management, investing in recruitment, learning and development, as well as awards and recognition. In other words, the data and measurement were guiding our management plan. And one third reason to value data is that actually we discovered that data really helps to push the agenda forward, gain momentum, and accelerate the pace of change. Specifically by linking actions to concrete results is not only a motivating proof of progress, it can also be used to influence people and reinforce the behaviors we want to see, and even sometimes stimulate personal initiative. For example, it was truly amazing how the organization collective result empowered the employees, staff, and managers alike to up their game and go well above and beyond what they had been accustomed to do for nearly a decade, and just in order to improve the organization and serve it better. I had managers who started to seek feedback from their peers, their employees, their supervisors in order to improve. In this sense, I thought that it's not only a good management tool, it can also almost be used as a leadership development tool. In fact, one day I got a call from the deputy minister who seemingly saw in what we were doing, our people management practices and how they were informed by data, an example of talent management. And so she invited me to come talk to be part of a panel discussion on talent management in front of the entire executive cadre of DFO. We're talking 330 executives in a room. It was a bit of an odd request for me because on one hand, only 3 years earlier, our organization was still considered as the black sheep of the department. And now we were supposed to share our best practices about talent management. But other than that, when we embark on a transformation journey, we never set out to do talent management in the first place. In fact, I can't recall ever pronouncing the word talent until that point. But I finally reconcile my hesitation with that by reframing the issue of talent management. And to this day, I look at talent management as not being something that you do, but rather the result of the things you do well. It's like the whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts. So I arrived at this DFO meeting talking about talent management, and sure enough, after about 20 minutes, one executive walked to the mic and said, "How can we talk about talent management when it takes 6 months to a year to staff a position?" Now, this was my cue. This was the moment I was waiting for. I said, "Actually, sir, where I work, we do it in 3 weeks, and we've done it already 50 times over in that amount of time." Gasp in the audience, shockwave through the room. People don't believe it. And as it was always the case, the director said, "Well, you're probably breaking policies and the PSCA." That's always a default assumption. When I proved that we were not, that in fact we had been audited several times and all our processes were good, then they jump into the second strategy, which is explaining, justifying why they can do it. So they would invoke, "Oh, I'm in a special case, I have a very special, highly specialized position, or I need to staff position in a remote area, so it's very difficult to do it in 3 weeks." And I would respond, "I staff Bella Bella. Do you know what Bella Bella is? Our office in Bella Bella is an island with 4 fishery officers living alone on that island for 2 years." And I said, "I still staff Bella Bella in 3 weeks, so you don't have an excuse." And after fielding more objections like that, the room grew quieter and quieter and quieter, and then until it got awkwardly silent. And at that point, my director ran to my rescue, jumped on stage, grabbed the mic, and said, "Look, I'm the director of this organization. What he's saying is true. We do staffing in 3 weeks. We do all these other things. The employees love it. The managers love it. The union is on board. We wouldn't do any differently nowadays, now that we know what's the result and how it impacts the entire organization. Here's my phone number. Give me a call. Étienne and I will tell you how to do it. We will sit down with you. We will make it work for you." How many phone calls do you think he got out of 330 executives in the room? And yes, it was a bit of a trick question. He got one, but it was not from an executive. It was from a management trainee who was standing in the back of the room. She was the only person who had the curiosity and the desire to maybe change things. So that moment, by the way, almost marked the beginning of the end of my career. Things really spiraled out after that. But kidding aside, why am I sharing their story? Because there are 3 takeaways that I would like you to leave with. The first one is that while I believe that the Public Service Employee Survey is not about employees, and it's much more about leadership and good management, and I highly encourage you to repeat that idea in your organization at every opportunity that you get, I must warn you, you should expect resistance. Data and measurement can shine light on things that will challenge some people's self-interest, gut feelings, and cherished opinions based on nothing but opinions. There's a great quote from an author named Annette Simmons that goes like this: "Whenever you tell a story that contradicts someone's core story, they will usually get angry. This is a natural defense. People fight for their limitations because it is what they know. If you choose to tell empowering stories, you will encounter anger as people defend their victim stories. When a news story demands courage, extra effort or invalidates past choices, people usually get very defensive. The second takeaway has to do with this idea of mindsets and behaviors, which is the theme of Beyond 2020. Logic would have it that mindset should come first, followed by behavior. That is accurate indeed, and that is what we did for most of our transformation. If I look at staffing, for example, and the reason why we were able to staff in 3 weeks, it had largely to do with the fact that Director and I recognize that 100% of the work that gets done in our organization gets done by people. Therefore, when there's a vacancy, our priority should be to find the people to do the work. Then the work will take care of itself. That was a mindset that drove our behavior. But that logic is not shared by everyone. Which is okay, because just because the mindset should normally precede behaviors, there's still the alternative scenario that is possible, which is that in some case, you can jump straight to behavior and the mindset will take root after. One such example would be how we approach performance management. We have serious performance management issues after 7 years of 2/3 of our supervisory position being vacant. So performance management was clearly not an ingrained habit. And the first step that we took towards changing our approach to performance management was just an email that went out coming from the director, sent to all the supervisors, CCing all the employees in the organization so that everyone would know what are the expectations on the supervisor. And the director said something like this. He said, "We have just cleared the staffing backlog. All the supervisors are now empowered to do their job, their performance management, and I expect them to do so. But I know it's hard work. I myself, I am apprehensive every time I need to have one of these difficult conversations with a direct report. I have to push myself to do it, and I expect you to do the same. If you don't manage the performance problems in your business units, you become my performance management problem." Behavior first, the mindset followed. We did several things to equip the managers to properly do performance management, and the basic one was just repeat the message over and over and over and over again for 3 years. But eventually, the mindset, the importance of managing performance took roots. The final takeaway is that it's this idea that the problem isn't out there. In order to change the culture, the mindsets, and the behaviors, taking ownership is critical. Changing yourself leads to change. At the very beginning of our journey, I had just completed the analysis of the 2005 Public Service Employees Survey when my director and I attended a staff meeting in Terrace on the north coast of British Columbia with about 25 to 30 fishery officers in the room. This was the first time that the director spoke to a group of employees. And when he addressed the crowd, his first words were the following. He said, "My goal as director is to restore some pride in the uniform." When he said that, he could barely look at the people in the room because he himself was a 25-year career fishery officer and he knew the history. But he had seen the data from the survey and he knew how bad the situation was. Observing the situation from the side of the room, I looked at the reaction of the people when he pronounced those words, and I saw every head in the room gently nod. It was as if people were saying, yeah, restoring some pride, that would be really nice. Now, the director didn't say, my goal is to enforce the Fisheries Act, or my goal is to deliver the program in the most efficient way possible. These are just bland visions. His vision was a shared vision, one that everybody in the room could intuitively adhere to. But more subtly, what he was saying was, the data is clear. We're a mess. As someone who has been with the organization for 25 years, I am part of that mess, and I have contributed to it. Now, as a leader, I'm taking full ownership of this. This problem is now my problem, and I commit to make you proud of this organization we're all part of. Enough talk, it's time to launch the second act. And now you know how the story unfolded after. Thank you.
So thank you very much, Étienne, for that very thought-provoking discussion. We do have some time for questions. So we have a volunteer, and she's got a microphone, so she can go through the audience and hand you a mic if you'd like. And as well, for those of you online, if you send us in an email, we can answer questions. So does anyone have a question? Yes, one over here.
Hi, Étienne. Thank you very much for that. I have a ton of questions for you, but the one I just really want to ask, you told us the story of when you were in the room presenting your findings and you had basically crickets sounding. Curious as to how you would do that differently if you're trying to pitch something and show with evidence that you can do things differently, especially with the lessons learned in this day and age of really trying to use data to inform performance measurement, performance management, and people management.
I probably wouldn't do it as part of a panel. I would probably craft a story and arrive armed with data to prove the points. And also, honestly, I was a little arrogant about it at the time. I still am. I'm still very, very proud of those results. And as far as I know, they're still unmatched. There has been no transformation like this one in the public service. So I cherish that little story, but definitely it is even a discussion that the director and I had about how we didn't want to come across as being self-righteous, but we really, and that's why we always offered people, we're going to help you. We're going to sit down with you and we will help. And we never turned down any requests. But the uptake was very, very low, almost non-existent, in fact.
I'm actually just curious. You were talking about how many grievances you had or how many they had before you started with the staffing processes. When you started that 3-week paperboard, did the grievances slow down?
No. Actually, so I should have mentioned, grievances quickly, like within months, went from 9 to 10 per week to less than 1 per year, and remained at that level for the 5 years that followed. With regard to the paperboard, the reaction, your concern has been echoed several times, especially by my HR folks at the time. But the data of the Public Service Employee Survey showed that not only the employees felt that they had a better opportunity to demonstrate their capabilities through that process than any other standardized test or 30-minute interview. Like we were up, I think, 27% or 25% compared to the rest of the public service that was going down 10% at the same time under the same policies, same legislation. So I think, no, the employees actually appreciated, and the idea partly came from the employees themselves. They were voicing their how fed up they were with standardized tool and knowledge tests that didn't mean anything, about having to demonstrate in 1 hour or 30 minutes everything that they have done for the past 2,000 hours in the year and the last 15 years. The approach, moving to a portfolio approach and a narrative explanation of how people met merit, much better reflected their desire to be recognized for their contribution.
Okay, so I have a question regarding the data. Most teams don't have that kind of data to start to solve a problem. So in your experience, what would you tell a team that is going through the same but don't have the real data and just rely on someone's opinion to get the work done?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't have the answer. I know that for the result of the Public Service Employee Survey to be reported for a business unit, you need to have at least 30 responses, I think, or has it gone down? Do you know? 10? Oh, it's now down to 10. Back in the days, it was 30. So in this case, a business unit less than 10 might be hard. I don't have a specific answer. One thing we did, however, so the public service was one source of data, but through every means that we opened up communication with the staff, whether it was by email, conference calls, in-person meeting, we always made sure that there were several feedback loops available, both anonymous and face-to-face, if possible. And over time, as we built trust in the organization, the people were much more confident about just coming up to me and say, we have a problem there, we need to address it. And but you need to be very consistent in how you respond to these suggestions.
Comment t'expliques que
How do you explain that when you propose to help these managers, you said, come and see me, give me a call? Just one person, in fact, expressed interest. How do you explain that phenomenon? 330 people who remain silent. Well, I have a theory. I hesitate to share it, but I've done it. And that is the idea that people want to make sure the problem stays there, and that way and then because it focuses attention elsewhere than on the manager. For example, when the department heads could say, no, it's a hiring issue and that's why I can't deliver my program and I can't meet my objectives and that I'm overworked and I'm losing my staff. So it was a very practical excuse for them. And if I can suggest to them, listen, you can hire in 3 weeks and I can settle all your problems, that means that all of a sudden there's a lot of pressure on program delivery if they're at full employment. So that's my theory, and of course I don't have any data to back it up.
Thanks, Étienne. I really liked your YouTube series on hiring.
Thank you.
That I'm just starting looking in, and as somebody coming from public sector who definitely doesn't have the experience of hiring in 3 weeks, we struggle to hire in months. How do you do it? So I mean, you described it on your YouTube series, but will that do it all? I mean,
on the YouTube series, it's actually a collection of practices from other organizations. It's not based on what I used to do it. I wrote a couple of documents, however, detailing with every email, every communication, how we did it. If you give me your email, I'll be happy to share those documents with you. Yes, sir?
Hi.
Yes.
I have a question out of curiosity, which is, after you and your director left that work environment, were the changes in mindset and behavior, did they outlive you?
Yes. Nice anecdote, but the director and I began at the same time. Actually, he hired me before becoming the director and got in trouble for that. He shortly after became the director, and I took a very long sabbatical break from the public service for 7 years, and I left the same day that he retired. So that was our story, our journey together. But after we left, I would say that the mindsets and behaviors remain in place with one additional challenge, at least for the next 5 years. With one additional challenge that the next 5 years corresponded with DRAP. But the following directors and my successor really understood what we were trying to achieve and really understood the importance of maintaining the course. And actually, the staffing process that I described earlier remained identical pretty much for 10 years, for a decade. And even during DRAP, the new director was determined to not cut a single job. I don't know how he managed to do it. He did it. Because the budgets were cut by about 30% over 3 years, and he managed not to cut a single job. He closed some offices, sold a lot of equipment, sold a lot of boats, but just moved the positions around and kept everyone on staff. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much, Étienne. That was very interesting. And I'm glad that people asked some questions about your YouTube information because you got a really good plug earlier today. So I think people should check that out for sure. So I'd like to thank Étienne for his time and thoughtful words. And I'd also like to thank you for all of your participation. And that concludes this year's FedTalks. Thanks.